The officer placed his right hand on the Bible and swore to God he had seen me throw a punch. He described my fist connecting with his jaw in precise, unhurried detail. The angle, the force, the exact second it happened. He had a badge, 26 years on the force, and a voice that never trembled. I had a public defender who had learned my name 40 minutes before the hearing. What neither of them knew, what no one in that courtroom knew, was the laminated card in my left breast pocket, issued by the United States Department of Justice, with a 17-digit clearance code along its bottom edge. I had been waiting for the right moment to use it, and watching Officer Dennis Harlan smile at the jury with absolute confidence. I knew that moment was about 30 seconds away. But let me take you back to where it all started, because none of this makes sense without that night. I was 34 years old and had been working for the DEA's Special Operations Division for 6 years without a single incident. My cover was simple. I ran a logistics consulting firm out of Atlanta's West Side District, which gave me legitimate reason to move around the city at odd hours. My actual job was tracking financial networks connected to a cartel operation, laundering money through 3 shell companies registered in Georgia. The operation was called Iron Gate. It had been running for 2 years. We were 3 weeks from the largest coordinated arrest in the Atlanta field office's history. My supervisor, Special Agent Diane Kowalczyk, had told me that morning, "Marcus, 3 weeks. Don't do anything to draw attention." I had laughed. I had actually laughed. "Diane," I said, "I'm the most boring man in Atlanta." She hadn't laughed back. My apartment on Peachtree Street was deliberately ordinary. A mid-range sofa, a kitchen where I cooked real food because it kept me grounded, 2 laptops in the second bedroom that were never to be opened simultaneously. I had a neighbor named Gloria, a retired schoolteacher in her 60s who brought me collard greens on Sunday evenings and told me once she could tell I was a good man because I didn't slam doors. I smiled and thanked her, and did not correct her about what I actually did for a living. The evening of October 14th was cold for Georgia. 48 degrees, a sharp wind rattling the windows. I had driven across town to meet a contact who passed documents inside food trade magazines, and the meeting had gone without friction. I was driving north on Langford Parkway, heater running, sports radio murmuring, when I saw the blue lights in my rearview mirror. The professional reflex was immediate. I am Marcus Webb, logistics consultant. My car is clean. I have nothing. I pulled over smoothly and waited with both hands visible on the wheel. 2 officers, Dennis Harlan, came to my window. Late 40s, broad-shouldered, carrying his authority like furniture he'd owned since birth. His partner, Craig Tate, positioned himself behind my car. I caught Tate's face in the flash of passing headlights. Younger, maybe 30, with eyes that moved too quickly. The kind of man always calculating something. "License and registration," Harlan said. I handed them over without a word. He looked at them far too long for a clean license and a registered vehicle. Then he passed them to Tate without turning around, and fixed me with an expression that had already decided something. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to step out of the vehicle." "Can I ask the reason for the stop?" "Failure to maintain lane. Step out, please." I hadn't drifted. I knew I hadn't. 6 years of undercover work builds a precise mechanical control into your every visible behavior. But I stepped out. Because arguing is the worst thing you can do in that moment. I knew it. I did it anyway. And I still think about how knowing the right thing and doing it can still walk you straight off the edge of a cliff. What happened next took 4 minutes and 20 seconds. I know because I was running a passive audio log on a device clipped to my left ankle. Standard procedure for all SOD field operatives during active operations. Harlan told me to place my hands on the roof of the car. I did. Tate began what he called a pat-down but what felt like a search conducted by someone who already knew what he was looking for. I stayed completely still. Then I heard Harlan say, quietly, almost to himself, "What's this?" He was holding a small plastic bag near the passenger side door, a bag I had never seen, a bag that had not been in my car. The metallic taste hit the back of my throat so hard I had to swallow twice. My hands were flat on the roof, fingers spread wide, pressing down hard against the cold metal to keep my body absolutely still. Every trained instinct fired simultaneously. Don't identify yourself. The operation. 3 weeks. Iron Gate. Diane's voice. And underneath all of it, cold and clarifying as ice water, these two men had just planted evidence on a federal agent. They didn't know it, and I could not tell them without destroying 2 years of work and 3 informants' lives. "That's not mine," I said. My voice came out steady. I hated how steady it sounded. "Yeah, they never are," Harlan said. And in the complete calcified boredom of those 4 words, I understood with absolute certainty that this was not his first time. They arrested me for possession with intent to distribute, and, when I instinctively pulled back as Harlan grabbed my wrist without warning, an assault charge was added. Tate wrote the report at the hood of the car, pen moving without hesitation. I was booked at 11:14 p.m., processed, and placed in a holding cell, where a fluorescent light buzzed overhead with the sound of something dying, 1 flicker at a time. I had 1 call. I could not call Diane. Not on a monitored line, not without the risk of Iron Gate unraveling before the arrests were in place. I called the public defender's office and got a voicemail with a typo in the outgoing message. Gregory Sims, my assigned attorney, was 32 years old, 3 years out of law school, carrying a caseload that left him roughly 40 minutes per client. He wasn't incompetent, and he wasn't unkind. He shook my hand with attention, asked clear questions, and took notes in a yellow legal pad with a pen that kept running dry. But when I told him the evidence had been planted, he nodded the way people nod when they have heard something so many times it no longer arrives as extraordinary. "We'll look at everything they have," he said. "Don't worry." He said it the way someone says the check is in the mail. I made a decision alone in that cell. I would let the trial move forward. Iron Gate was 3 weeks from closing. If I surfaced now, every contact, every financial trace, every name we had spent 2 years building a case around would scatter like smoke. I would wait. I would let Sims work. And if the moment came where a lie was about to become a verdict, I would make a different choice. I pressed my back against the cold concrete and stared at the ceiling and calculated exactly how far I could let this go before the math stopped working in my favor. I made bail on a Thursday morning and walked out into November sunlight that felt completely indifferent to everything that had just happened. 6 weeks until trial. 3 weeks until Iron Gate closed. The numbers didn't line up neatly. They never do. I reviewed the prosecution's evidence from my apartment. The bag, the arrest report, the dashcam footage that had conveniently cut to static before the search began, and the sworn statements of both Harlan and Tate. I read every line with the focused attention of someone reading a contract they intend to break. Every lie was there in clean official language, dated, signed, and in the lining of my gray suit jacket, the card waited with its 17-digit code. I hadn't decided yet whether to use it, but I had not put it in a drawer either. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known at that point, was that Dennis Harlan had done this before. Not twice, not 5 times. The number that would surface later in that courtroom was the kind of number that makes a room go completely, airlessly still. The trial began on a Monday in December, in a courtroom that smelled of floor wax and recycled air. Judge Patricia Okafor presided, a woman in her late 50s with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and a reputation, Sims told me, for running a tight room. The gallery was sparse. courthouse regulars, a young reporter, and in the back row, entirely still, a white woman in a charcoal blazer I recognized immediately but pretended not to. Diane Kowalczyk had come to watch. She had not contacted me. When our eyes met for exactly 1 second, her expression didn't change. That told me everything. Irongate had closed. Whatever happened next in this room was mine to decide. Officer Craig Tate testified first. He was calm and specific in the way men are specific when they have rehearsed something until it feels like memory. He described the traffic stop, the smell he claimed to detect through my open window, my demeanor, agitated and uncooperative, and said he found the bag inside the door panel during what he called a lawful search. He said I had shoved Officer Harlan with both hands when placed under arrest. Sims cross-examined him for 11 minutes. Tate never blinked. Then Dennis Harlan took the stand, and something in the room tilted. He was better than Tate, more relaxed, almost conversational, leaning toward the jury with the ease of a man who had done this many times and found it unremarkable. He described the stop, the search, the assault. He described the force of the blow I allegedly landed. Caught me right below the cheekbone, knocked me back 2 steps. The prosecutor showed a photograph of a bruise on Harlan's face, taken the morning after. He confirmed it was from me. I looked at that photograph from the defense table and felt something go very cold and very clear inside my chest. Sims rose for cross and asked 4 careful questions that went nowhere. The prosecutor smiled. The jurors made small notes. Harlan sat in the witness box with the settled ease of a man who had already won. That was when I leaned close to Sims and said, barely above a breath, "Ask him whether he's ever had a complaint filed for misconduct involving evidence." I slid a folded printout across the table. A civil case from the public court database, partially sealed, but enough. Then ask for a recess. I need to show you something. Sims looked at me for a moment with the expression of a man recalibrating everything he thought he understood about his client. Then he stood. "Your Honor, 1 additional question, if I may." "Officer Harlan," Sims said carefully, "has a formal complaint of misconduct related to evidence handling ever been filed against you?" 3 seconds of silence. In a courtroom, that is a very long time. "There was 1 complaint," Harlan said. "Investigated. Found without merit." 1 complaint, Sims repeated slowly, as if tasting the number. "Your Honor, I'd like a brief recess." In the consultation room, I placed my credentials on the table between us. The DOJ identification card, the DEA Special Operations Division badge, and a printed authorization letter from the Atlanta Field Office, SAC, confirming my operative status on October 14th. Sims looked at them without touching them. When he finally looked up, the color had left his face. "You've been a federal agent this entire time. 6 years. And you didn't tell me. There was an active operation. It closed 2 weeks ago." I paused. "The night of the arrest, I was wearing an audio recording device, standard SOD procedure. The file is with my handler. It covers every second from the moment I pulled over." Sims pressed 2 fingers to his mouth. Then something shifted behind his eyes. The practiced resignation of a man who had been losing cases by default, reshaping itself into something harder. He picked up the badge carefully, looked at it, then picked up his phone and made 3 calls. When we returned to the courtroom, Diane was no longer in the back row. She was standing in the corridor with a man in a dark suit who carried a leather folder under his arm. She glanced at me once. 1 nod. That was all. The audio recording was admitted into evidence after a recess during which 2 calls were made to the DOJ. The clerk played 4 minutes and 22 seconds through the courtroom speakers. The room heard Harlan's voice saying, "What's this?" in the tone of a man performing a line he had delivered before, followed by the unmistakable sound of a bag being produced from a direction that was plainly not the interior of my car. Several jurors stopped writing. One woman in the third seat slowly put her pen down on the rail and did not pick it up again. Then Paul Garrett, senior investigator from the DOJ's Office of Professional Responsibility, took the stand and confirmed, in the flat, careful language of a man who spends his career delivering facts worse than any room has prepared for, that Officer Dennis Harlan had been the subject of not one complaint, but 11, spanning 14 years, 3 precincts, 9 black male defendants, 6 cases involving planted or mishandled evidence. 7 complaints had been filed, reviewed internally, and buried. 2 of the men he had arrested were currently serving sentences. The prosecutor did not object to any of it. She was staring at the table in front of her with the expression of someone who has just understood they were given false information by the very people they were prosecuting on behalf of. Harlan had gone completely still in the witness box, in the specific way men go still when all available exits close simultaneously. His partner Tate, seated in the gallery, quietly stood and moved toward the door. A bailiff placed a hand on his shoulder before he reached it. Judge Okafor removed her reading glasses from her forehead and put them on. When she spoke, her voice was absolutely level. "Counselor, I am going to give you 30 seconds to explain why I should not refer this matter to the DA for criminal perjury proceedings before I dismiss every charge against the defendant." The prosecutor didn't use 30 seconds. She used 4. "I cannot, Your Honor." I heard those words from the defense table, and the cold clarity that had been sitting in my chest since the moment I heard "What's this?" on the side of Langford Parkway, finally, slowly, released. My hands were flat on the table. They were not shaking. "Case dismissed," Judge Okafor said, "with prejudice." The gallery didn't erupt. The silence was louder than any applause could have been. Harlan was arrested on the courthouse steps. Perjury, evidence tampering, federal civil rights violations. Tate was detained in the corridor. The 2 men serving time from Harlan's prior fabrications had their cases referred for immediate review. The DOJ Civil Rights Division opened a formal investigation into the precinct within the week. 4 months later, on a Sunday evening, Gloria knocked on my door with collard greens and the news that some police officers had been caught lying in court for years. "I said to myself," she announced from my doorway, container in both hands, "that is what happens when you think no one is watching." I thanked her, took the greens, stood in my kitchen for a moment looking at the container in my hands. Diane called on a Tuesday to say the Iron Gate arrests had held. 17 individuals, 4 shell companies dismantled, a network gone in a single coordinated morning. She didn't mention the trial. Neither did I. Some things don't need to be said between people who understand what they cost. I still drive Langford Parkway sometimes. At night, heater running, radio low. I pass the exact spot where the blue lights appeared in my mirror, and I feel, not fear, not anger, not the metallic taste of that night, just a clean, steady awareness. The card is still in my jacket, just a different jacket now. I am still the most boring man in Atlanta, but I have learned with some precision exactly what boring men are capable of when they are pushed far enough.